In a quiet, secluded town in Denmark, there are well-proportioned log cabins with thick thatched roofs and occasional curls of smoke from chimneys. The streets of the town are narrow and simple, and the stone-paved pavement is smooth over the years. There are several small shops along the street, selling simple daily necessities and local handicrafts. In this seemingly ordinary town, there lived a young man named Hans. Hans was extremely thin, as if a gust of wind could blow him down. His face was clear, his cheeks slightly sunken, and his skin was slightly pale from long-term labor and lack of nutrition. However, his eyes were always shining brightly, like the brightest stars in the night sky, revealing his curiosity about the unknown world and his persistent pursuit of dreams. He read many classic fairy tales with fascination, and those creators used words to weave a magical and warm world. It was like a magical key that opened the door to his inner imagination. He longed to be like them, creating one intoxicating fairy tale kingdom after another with the pen in his hand, allowing readers to immerse themselves in it and feel endless joy and emotion. The life of a small town is like a glass of plain boiled water, day after day, year after year, dull and boring. The people in the small town are busy making a living every day. They work at sunrise and rest at sunset. The men mostly worked in the fields, growing various crops, or went to work in nearby factories. Women run the household at home, taking care of children and the elderly. Hans was doing simple manual work in a small workshop, which was filled with the pungent smell of glue and the fragrance of wood. He sat in front of a dilapidated workbench from morning to night, skillfully fiddling with the parts with his rough hands and assembling them into simple handicrafts. His meager income was only enough for him to maintain the most basic living. He lived in a cramped room, and the walls of the room had peeled off, revealing the bricks inside. A shabby bed took up most of the room, and beside it was a simple table stacked with books and papers. But even though life was so difficult, Hans never gave up on his creative dreams. Every night, when the town fell into a deep slumber, he would light a faint candle in that small, dark room. The candle flickered, casting his lonely shadow on the wall. He carefully took out the rough paper and a battered pen, and began to write down the whims in his mind on the paper. The tip of his pen rustled on the paper, as if it were the sound of him talking to a dream. However, reality was like a basin of cold water, ruthlessly extinguishing his enthusiasm. The workers in the workshop gathered around and laughed at Hans' fairy tale. One of the burly workers said with disdain,
"Hans, if you don't work hard and write these useless things all day, can you eat it as a meal? We have to earn money with our hands to support our families, not have these unrealistic dreams."
Other workers echoed, and laughter echoed in the workshop. Neighbors also thought he was a whimsical madman, and an old woman with gray hair frowned and persuaded him earnestly.
Hans, you better give up this unrealistic idea earlier. Life is very realistic, and writing fairy tales can make you live a good life.
Hans felt extremely depressed and lonely. He walked alone in the streets of the town, and the cold wind of the night cut his face like a knife. He began to wonder if his dream was really too far away, like the stars in the sky, which seemed within reach but were also out of reach. But every time he saw the children playing in the streets, their innocent smiles and curious eyes, just like a beam of warm sunlight, it illuminated the dark corners of his heart, giving him the motivation to persevere. He thought that maybe these children needed his fairy tales and needed to find warmth and hope in those beautiful stories, like finding a light in the dark. Day by day, like a babbling stream, flowing silently, Hans still persisted in his creation, and his room was filled with paper full of words, like a hill. His fairy tales became more and more written, and his style became more and more mature. He began to try to integrate the sufferings of real life and the beauty of human nature into the story. In a fairy tale about stray dogs suffer from people's driving and indifference on the streets. But he remained kind and optimistic, and was eventually adopted by a kind family. He hopes to enable readers to experience the wonders while also having a deeper perspective on life. One day, a mysterious old man came to the town. The old man was wearing a shabby but tidy robe. The color of the robe was already a little dim, with some patches on it, but it was washed clean. His eyes were deep and gentle, as if they contained countless stories. When he heard about Hans, he asked around and finally found Hans' house. The old man gently knocked on Hans' door. Hans opened the door and saw the strange old man, his heart full of doubts. The old man smiled and said,
"I heard that you like to write fairy tales very much, and I want to see your work."
Hans handed over his work to the old man with a perturbed mood. The old man sat on the chair, leaning forward slightly, his eyes focused on the paper in his hand. The expression on his face was sometimes surprised and sometimes moved. After reading, the old man raised his head, his eyes full of admiration. He patted Hans on the shoulder lightly and said,
"Young man, your fairy tale is powerful. It is not just a simple story, but a profound insight into life. You have the potential to become a great writer."
Hans was so excited that tears filled his eyes when he heard the old man's words. This was the first time he had received such a high evaluation. His hands trembled slightly, and a warm current surged in his heart, as if the ship that had been lost in the darkness for a long time had finally seen the light of the lighthouse. The old man told Hans that there was a famous publishing house in a distant city. It was a tall building with a magnificent appearance, and the glass curtain wall shone brightly in the sun. There are many professional editors in the publishing house who specialize in publishing excellent fairy tales. He encouraged Hans to bring his own work to give it a try. Hans sets out on a journey to a big city with hope and trepidation. The bustle of the big city dazzled him. The streets were flooded with water, the high-rise buildings were lined, and the neon lights were flashing non-stop. Walking on the wide road, he felt like a tiny ant, and everything around him made him feel incomparably small and inferior. He followed the old man's instructions and found the publishing house. The editors of the publishing house sat in spacious and bright offices, dressed in neat suits, with serious and professional expressions. They showed some interest in Hans' work, but they also made many demanding demands. A bespectacled editor frowned and said,
"Your fairy tale is too heavy and lacks some light-hearted humor elements, which does not meet the needs of the market, and readers may not like it."
Hans was caught in a dilemma. He didn't want to change his creative style to cater to the market, because those stories were the true expression of his heart. It is his perception and reflection on life. But he doesn't want to lose this rare opportunity, which may be the only way for him to achieve his dream. After much thought, he decided to stick to his style. He summoned the courage to tell the editors,
"My fairy tale is an expression of my heart, and it reflects the true face of life. Maybe it's not light and humorous enough, but it can make readers think and move."
The editors were so moved by his insistence that they exchanged glances, nodded, and finally decided to publish his work. After Hans' collection of fairy tales was published, his collection of fairy tales lay there quietly, unattended. But as time went by, more and more people were attracted by his story. The children found joy and courage in his fairy tales, and they would pester their parents to read Hans's fairy tales to themselves before going to bed at night, immersing themselves in those fantastical worlds. Adults see the shadow of life and the brilliance of human nature in it, and they read it carefully in their spare time, reflecting on the truth contained in the story. However, Hans did not forget his original intention. He returned to the town, and the people in the town were very surprised by his return. He used his royalties to improve the living conditions of the town, and he built new roads for the town to make travel more convenient. He also built a library for children, filled with all kinds of fairy tale books, with a dazzling array of books on the shelves, including exquisite picture books and thick story collections. Children can read freely here and immerse themselves in the ocean of knowledge. The mysterious old man was actually a famous fairy tale writer who had a high reputation in the literary world. He is always on the lookout for potential newcomers, and he travels to many places to uncover hidden talents. He saw the talent and perseverance in Hans, so he decided to help him. He believes that true fairy tales are not just for entertainment, but also to convey love and hope, making the world a better place. Hans' story continues. He still picks up the pen. He will continue to write more warm and powerful fairy tales. Let more people find the meaning and courage of life in his story.